Hey everybody, welcome to the July 27th Tinderbox meetup. I don't see Mark Bernstein or our colleague Mark Anderson, so I will handle it today until they show up. And basically what we're here to do is we're here to talk about tools for thought, 5 C's of knowledge management, the tool of Tinderbox, and how do we unleash our creative potential with all of these tools that we have. Typically, the way the format of these meetups work is we go around the room and, oh, I don't have my video on. Sorry about that. We go around the room and we have new people introduce themselves. I don't really see anyone new, although I don't know Jane very well. Hi, Mark. And then we have people talk about the projects that they're working on, any puzzlements that they have. And then if they have a theme, or if we have a theme, we jump right into that theme. And we so happen to have a theme today, and that is curriculum vitae and resume writing in Tinderbox. So I'm going to go through and demonstrate suggestions and processes on how to go about doing that. Jane, I apologize. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. If not, I don't remember your background. So you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and before that, my my training was wildlife science. I work for the Forest Service. That's not the Forest Service in the background. That just we visited a place at Argonne National Lab. And briefly, I'm trying to put together information and try to write better and faster.
Okay. And are you currently a Tinderbox user or and have license and use it?
Yeah, yes, I'm trying to get better at using it. So, I've been stabbing at it for quite a long time. I think I've renewed my license at least 3 times. So, um, and now I'm trying to do a more concerted approach to it.
Yeah, and I think today's exercise is going to help you a lot. While we're theming it resume writing and CV writing, it's really just writing and note organization and all of the core issues that you'll need to support your research. So that will help out a lot. And don't feel bad if you've renewed your Tinderbox license a few times and never figured it out. As I've often said, I'm 10 plus 4 years into Tinderbox, 10 years of subscribing to it and never figuring out how to use it, and 4 years finally getting value and figuring out how to use it. So you're
Mark
not alone.
Bernstein's pocket is very thankful for that.
Yes.
I've been learning a lot from your videos.
Wonderful. That's why they're there. That's exciting. I love hearing that. Okay. Anybody else have any topics that they're working on, questions that they have about the any projects that they happen to want to discuss? If not, we can just jump right into our theme for the day.
Mike, I'd just say I know Mark's still traveling, so I don't expect him to turn up today.
Okay, good. All right. Okay. I'm trying to clear my screen a little bit. Did anybody have anything or no? Should we just jump right into the theme?
Are we recording?
We are recording. I thought, yeah, we are recording. Yeah. Okay. If not, gone. We're going to go ahead and jump into the theme. All right. Let me share my screen. Come on. Okay. So the theme of today is CV and CV and resume writing, and I'm going to go up and show you how I've gone out pulling this together for myself. Because I'm teach for National University and several other schools, and they wanted me to provide them an updated CV, so I went ahead and did that. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through a whole series of different methodologies, thoughts, frameworks on how to go about pulling together all of this different type of information. Likewise, we'll talk about prototypes, we'll talk about functions, we'll talk about templating, all of the different capabilities, note organization, etc. And then ultimately, your goal would be to have some form of output to which you can share your CB with with the world and the audience. Let me capture some of these other names here. Hi, Art. Great to see you.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Awesome. Melvin. If I don't capture the roll call now, I often will forget. Okay, so the goal is to then ultimately have a CV not in Tinderbox, but one that you can actually share with people. And I'll give you an example of output here. And kind of the difference between a resume and a CV, and there's various different formats and thoughts and ideas out there about these tools. And really the one is the, come on. My computer is slowing down. I'm going to shut off my Chrome. So I've got about 200 browser tabs open, literally. Kill Chrome because I don't need it. That should save some space. Let me stop sharing screen real quick just to get my RAM back up. Sorry about this, everyone. There's the CV, and there is the resume. Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. And ultimately, our goal or our output is, a Word file, a PDF file, or something of this nature. So let's say this is the test doc I'm working on. But let's say this is a resume. So it's a summary. Typical resume is a summary, some kind of your notable experiences, employment history. And you want to keep resumes relatively short, ideally 1-2 pages, sometimes 3 or 4 for some of these us that fall into the class of elder statesmen who've done quite a bit. So the way I chose to organize this is, and I'll show you how I did this in Tinderbox, is my current primary employment, of my bucket of teaching, and then I've just kind of lumped all of my past employment into a broader paragraph. We then talk about educational history, and then and those different elements. Then I have a bucket of like core skills, both technical skills and soft skills, professional and scholarly domain interests, and then finally a discussion around my publications. So this is one way of going about looking at and pulling together a CV or a resume. And then another way is what I'll call the more extensive version of that. And this is like the giant, massive brain dump that is everything that I've done. And this one actually includes a table of contents. And I'll just summarize it, and then I'll show you how I pulled this together in Tinderbox. So similar elements: summary, notable experiences, employment history. But now I'm going down into all of the different details about clients and different roles that I may have played in different organizations throughout the career, and what the goal were. What the goals and the objectives were, those kind of more details about the educational history, a bulleted list this time of the technical skills and soft skills, volunteering that I've actively participated in, including the different roles that I may have had in that volunteering, patents, trademarks, awards received, research and speaking, courses I've taught, programs I've run, projects I have work in progress, my teaching narrative, just to kind of give people a sense of what I'm doing there, publications that, document, articles, books, reports, and this is just a smattering of them, not the blog articles, a journal I've edited, and then all of my public speaking for the last 20 so years. So there's about 500 or so events here, and I think I'm missing a couple hundred. So I was able to pull all of this together in about 2.5 days this week, leveraging and using Tinderbox. So let me show you. Let me pause there before we dig into that. Make sense what we're trying to accomplish here? How do we get from Tinderbox into a Word file? Sorry, I've got 3 screens, so if I'm looking around, I'm looking for your faces. So that makes sense? Thumbs up, we're good? Okay, so so how do we go about doing that? So let's start with the longer version, and this is really the way I go about organizing documents in Tinderbox. And the great thing about Tinderbox too is, you can use map view, you can use all of the different views. For this type of structured writing, I tend to gravitate to outline view. For those that may not know what I'm talking about, you have all of these different views in Tinderbox: map view, chart view, timeline, tree map, attribute, crosstab, table, and the new recently introduced view in Gaudi view. And we're not going to go into these today, but that's one of the powers of Tinderbox, is the ability to have a common single set of data, aka your notes, and then to be able to look at those notes through various different lenses, as in this case in Tinderbox, we call those views. And those views help you ideate and help you think and help you iterate throughout your processes. And when I get on a roll, Mr. Anderson, if you can monitor the chat for me in case somebody has questions that I forget. So we're going to focus on outline view today. And typically what I will do is I will go ahead and put the bigger section heads within Tinderbox. One of the things I like about this outline view is you can always reorder them and change where they go within their particular sections. And so that could be really valuable as you're thinking, as opposed to when you're working in let's say a long linear Word or Google document. Like this one, moving sections around can be quite difficult and you can't really see it. So one of the values I get out of Tinderbox is this accordion view, the ability to expand and collapse the elements that I'm working on, I find incredibly valuable. So if I go ahead and expand these things, you can see here I've got my summary, I have my notable experiences and accomplishments, all of the different roles I've done, all of the different education I've had, different skills, professional certificates, and I'll explain what I mean. No show title right now. I don't actually have any. There's many that I want. Volunteering activities I've done, my patents and trademarks, awards, and then my research, teaching, professional activities. So the goal here with this effort and exercise is really to throw in the kitchen sink, throw everything in, get creative. Because one of the challenges I have personally when working in like Word or Excel or Google Docs or something of that nature is, in other words, when working in output software, when you want to make edits or changes, if something doesn't fit in that linear document or in that tabular presentation or in the bulleted PowerPoint, invariably what ends up happening is to say, I don't need that for this particular implementation. So I'm going to copy it and stick it into another one. And that will become my like archived document. But invariably, what do? We forget about that archived document or we're really busy. And so what we do, I'm just going to delete it because I don't need it for this implementation. But then once you've done, it's now gone. And then recovering that is near impossible. Or you end up creating multiple versions. So you end up having 25 versions of the same document, all slightly different because of the things you've either deleted or edited. So again, one of the other values I find in using the Tinderbox is I can throw everything in one place and then selectively filter my material to determine what I want to be able to put in or not. And a great example of that is if I go down to education, or go up to education, would be, I had fun with this. So I put in my my schooling, and I broke something just before the program started. So let me see if I can fix that real quick. I was messing around with the code right before I started and I broke my short titling functionality, which is a bummer. Wait, delete that. Okay. So this should be able to get it back. All right, I'll fix this short titling functionality I just broke in just a minute. But what you're able to see here, actually, let me see if I can fix it right now. Let me stop my screen because I did it like 10 minutes before we started, and that was a mistake. I got to open up a different file to grab it. Do it this way. Sorry. Don't do it now. It will just get in our way. So I got to grab this and come over here. Now hopefully this will fix it. This is a great example of be careful messing around with your stuff just before you're going to share it. So hopefully this is going to fix it. All right. This one. That should do it. Let me double check. Yeah, okay, that got it fixed. All right. So go back to sharing. Okay, so you see, I actually put in my grade school. I put in my elementary school. I put in my high school. Now, you don't necessarily want these elements in your output resume for professional sake, but for your own kind of your memoir, your what you might want to do in the future, or just for fun, like what were you thinking? You might want to have that stuff in there. And for me, when I go through this ideation process with Tinderbox, I don't want to have to think, is this when I'm especially in that collection stage, I don't want to have to think, is this idea appropriate? Should I worry about whether or not this belongs here or not? When I'm in the collection stage of the 5 C's of knowledge management, and those 5 C's are collection, curation, creation, collaboration, and contribution. When I'm at that collection stage, I don't want to filter. I'm brainstorming. So I'm going to throw everything in. As I go through the curation, I'll modify, I'll tag. As I go through creation, I'll create new insights. As I collaborate with others, we'll attribute and edit. And then it's only when I need the output, when I'm getting to this Word file, when I'll actually start filtering my thoughts, when I'll start going to evolve and edit the different ideas. So I throw that stuff in there, and I'll show you how we can edit that out. So the first step in going through this process, and Mr. Anderson, if you wouldn't mind helping me take some notes on this as well so we can capture it later. Like step 1, think through the hierarchy, think through the structure that you'd want to be able to go through this process. So that's kind of and then once you've got through your structure, remember it's all about incremental formalization. So if you've started with a structure, that doesn't mean that structure can't change. You can move things around, you can relabel them, you can change them, you can incrementally formalize them along the lines. Once you have the structure, you can start populating that structure with the core title notes, like the different jobs that I've had, identity praxis, Cal Poly, National University, etc. Then once you've actually started that, then so I would, as I think about it, it's basic structure that I know can or more than likely will change as my project evolves. It's the top level note, a job, a piece of education, a technical or soft skill details, and then you start to populate. And then the way to start to populate is you add attributes. And I've already got some prototypes up and running. I'm assuming people in this call already know prototypes. If not, you can look at some of our past videos. I already have some prototypes installed. In this case, I'm calling this prototype resume item or res item to which I created. And you'll see I've got a variety of prototypes. And so I've got a prototype of type, the start date, the end date, the location, my title, the summary of this company or what it does, its URL, and then several Boolean triggers that I use to inform my templates what I want Tinderbox to do with this various information. So for example, some of those Booleans are, and I'll explain them right now, is this current? Is this a current role or a current activity? And that will determine how things get filtered. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. So when I say a Boolean, as we're going through this training, if you go to Tinderbox and you go to create a new attribute, you can actually create a new attribute and you can select from a whole different type of attribute types. An attribute is essentially your data field, and you can call it a string, which is a string of alphanumeric characters, a color, a number, a file, a Boolean, which is essentially yes or no, true or false. A date, is it a set, meaning a list of items that are unique, a URL, a list of items that can allow for duplicates. So a set would be orange, yellow, blue, and a list could be orange, blue, blue, yellow, right? So you also too, just so we're aware and people that are paying attention, sets are automatically alphabetized by Tinderbox and lists are not. So if you need to create a list of items and you don't want them to be and you don't want Tinderbox to reorder them, aka in alphabetical order, you use lists. If you,
Michael, just to quick and jump in there.
Yeah.
The difference of sets is it does have that result. The reason sets are like that is they are actually deduplicated.
right.
So the alphabetization is a byproduct of the deduping. So the point is that if you make a set, it will only have one value, case sensitively, per values it holds.
Right, so that's what I meant by like orange, blue, blue,
yeah,
yellow.
Yeah.
is
The point being that the
Oh.
subtlety being that the alphabetization is just merely a byproduct of the deduping. It's not in a sense a deliberate fact.
Yes, but be that as it may, why it is occurring doesn't necessarily matter. The fact that it is occurring does.
Yeah, no, but what I mean is but what I was trying to get people to understand that the key point about a set is it's deduped, not that it's alphabetized, it's deduped. So in other words, if you don't understand what a set is, it's a list that is deduped.
Right, and that's how maybe I thought I introduced that in that way, but that's fine. Then you have intervals, which are basically time-based dictionaries, which allow you to do lookups, and then you can have email addresses. So these are the different elements of attributes that you can create. And when I look at my Tinderbox files, you know, I would really encourage you to be. You can always move them. You can always merge them. Typically, my Tinderbox files will have anywhere from 100. Some of them have 500 attributes. So don't be shy. And you're not limited just to the system generated attributes that are in Tinderbox. Likewise, for me, I've developed a convention for myself. So any kind of Boolean starts with an is yes. Accomplishments for me says when this is checked, it means yes, include those items. Is no show title means when this is checked, don't do this thing. So you want to develop a convention for yourself when you're naming them. The other thing I've done in my naming convention is like anything that starts with anything that has a date involved in it, I'll say date access, date close, date deliver. So that way I've got this structure in my head. Anything related to date start with date. Anything related with Boolean start with is. And lists and sets I just tend to remember. Mr. Anderson, you got a comment?
Sorry, I was going to make the point easily overlooked that don't forget to if you're going to use lots of user attributes, you can actually, when you make them, provide a description.
Right. So
it's easily overlooked, but once you've got hundreds of them, you can easily forget what they're for. And the other thing is that you might say, why do I need so many? If you're used to a tool where essentially you have a tag bucket, so you have a note and you can put all sorts of keywords, tags, call them what you will, it might seem odd. So one of the things that you might simply be doing by the act of making a number of different attributes is de-interleaving, say 3 or 4 different streams within your tags. So the problem is often with tags, you end up with just too many. It's difficult to find what you want. But if, say, you've got tags about, I don't know, you know, you're talking about plants, you might be whether they're perennial or whether they're, you know, deciduous. They might be perennial, annual, all these sort of things. Now you could just put that fact into a tag bucket, or you could say, right, you could have a thing says something like is perennial. Where that helps is when you come later to query your work, it's much easier to then write a query to say, I want to look at the thing I'm interested about, rather than trying to fish my tag out of an enormous bucket.
And I'll give you an example of that exact fact later when I talk about and give you an example of skills. So I think that's a really good point. So my key point here is these are what attributes are. When you're creating your attributes, think about your different you know, naming structures, because that and again the emphasis there is when you're writing the action code, which is really a power of Tinderbox. When you have a naming convention or a naming structure, it's easier to not misspell things. It's easier to remember what they are. Yeah, and it's also easier to do those filters and lookups as Mark was talking about. So, and I'll show you some examples of that I even just created this morning. So that's an example of this. Now let me show you some of the ways this kind of propagates it out. And I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the what, the why, and the how as we go through this discussion, because I also want to show you the outputs, not just the mechanics of the sausage making in the process. So if I'm looking at an employment and I go ahead and I review this whole item, this is essentially using a template that I've written, and it's displaying all of these attributes, all of these values that I have for, say, that job and all of its values and attributes in this text. And I've got a template that says when you have an item that is a resume item, when its prototype is resume item and its type is employment, then I want you to display that information in this way. So, and I'll show you that template right now. And that's the way. So when I want you to just when you have an item called employment, display it this way. And so you've got and you also and I want the name of that employment item hyperlinked. So when you click on it, it will actually take you to that company's web page. So that's the way I've done this, and the way I want it formatted is company name, address, the title, role, and then a brief description. Now, how that goes about doing it is using this templating functionality that is in Tinderbox. So if I roll down to my Tinderbox template that I've written for this, and again, I've done this. I'm going to say, Mark counseled me the other day when I suggested the word just. I just pulled these templates together in 2 days. But going back to Jane's earlier point, 2 days is a bit of a lie. It's more like 10 plus 4 years plus 2 days. And when you actually are trained and taught, most of that 14 years was me stumbling around in the dark. The objective of these classes, these videos, these courses is to save you 14 years. And hopefully you can do in a couple of days what took me 14 years to learn how to do. So when I look at when I'm looking at my templating structure here, I essentially have a cascading approach to my template. So I'm saying the top level template is the resume. And if you go down and all of this template, we'll deal with the HTML later, but all this template is doing is saying, do some stuff in ordering, determine what you want to show on the page, and that if there are any children to a particular note, where you say it says, children, use this template. And let me define what I mean by children. If I've selected this note here and I hit preview, that top level note T resume is the template I'm applying to this note employment resume. If I've then Tinderbox will says, well, who are the children of employment resume? All of these different jobs. So if you look here, I'm saying top level template T resume. The children of T resume, I want you to use T resume pages, which is going to be this item here. And then I'm telling Tinderbox, when you then serve up the template T resume pages, what am I asking you to do? Well, what I'm asking you to do is look at the type of the different notes. And in this case, I'm saying if you're type employment or type education or type volunteering, I want you to use the item T resume item. If you're type journal, I want you to use the T render. If I want you to use, and again, we'll get into the details of all of this why later, but essentially that's the way the templating structure works, is you basically can cascade down the processes of templates. And so in the case when I go to T-level employment, so if I'm up here, you'll see this is the top level note. I select that, it's going to use the T resume to display it. If I then look at this child noted T resume identity praxis, it's types employment. So essentially what the templating cascading architecture is saying is start with T resume, then go find the template that I want you to display for the children, which is going to be T pages. And then when you're employment, I want you to go and use the resume item template. And so now I'm using resume item template. And then when you're in resume item template, what I'm telling Tinderbox, and I'm just going to go and show you the buckets of this. Let's not get distracted by all the line item details. I'm just going to chunk it out for you right now. This first bucket of code, which I actually haven't commented out, is This one is grab accomplishments list. Right. So if there is if the Boolean, remember I showed you those Boolean check marks in the note. If the Boolean is yes accomplishments, meaning if I want to have the accomplishments listed in the output, trigger all of this code here, which is essentially generating and building a list, an HTML bulleted list of the accomplishments. If and then this one's clients. Show clients. If the Boolean yes clients is showed, I want you to show past and current clients, and that's what this list is doing. And then I go down here and I say if yes roles is true, then I want you to show detailed roles. I then want you to show the detailed roles of the job. This is producing, and then if no show, this is then producing all of the variables that I want to then populate into the output. So if you look here, all of this code is essentially generating this list to then populate a variable called v accomplishments. All of this code here is essentially generating a list to populate a variable called v client. All of this code here is essentially generating a list to populate a variable called v role. So essentially when we're working in Tinderbox and when we have content in the various attributes in Tinderbox, our goal here is essentially to break the notes, break the ideas like a job into all of its atomic elements. So the overall atom is the job identity praxis. All of the elements of that job are my title, my time I was there, the time I started, the time I didn't, the summary of the company, all of those little, call them the electrons, the protons, however you want. All of the elements or attributes, aka or metadata of that role is what I'm, doing. And one of the powerful things of Tinderbox is once you've grokked this concept, you can take all of those elements, all of that content, and put it into any structure in any appearance you want at any time. And that's one of the values that I've learned by leveraging and using Tinderbox, is I've learned how to separate my content from its structure and appearance. And then once you've got that, you then have total control to have any output you want in any way, shape, or form. Really, really powerful concept to kind of wrap your head around. So now that I have those elements, v accomplishment, v role, v client, and then obviously the text of the note, down here is actually what the HTML that the note is actually populating. And you'll see here I've got conditions. If is no show title is false, then do this. If it's true, meaning I've checked that Boolean, then don't show the title. If it's false, then show the title. Then I want you to wrap the URL around the note name. I then want you to populate the v role value that got created. I want you to then also populate the v accomplishment role that got created. I want you to populate the v client role that got created. And we can, we won't have time today to deconstruct every element of all of these. I'm really here today really showing you the what as much as the why, more so than the individual elements of how, because it will take us some time to kind of deconstruct all of these little how elements. But that's the general structure of a template. Let me pause there. At a high level, does that make sense for everyone? Jane, does that you're following that? That's okay? Got it. All right. So let me show you this code in action. So let's look at the job identity praxis. And so the job identity praxis has employment. It has all of these checkboxes. It's current. It is, and I'll show you these other values now. Now let's say and I go and preview it. So I'm previewing it right now, and it's showing me, and that's that URL element right there that I showed you in the template. Let me show you. Let me go down to the template too and show you this a little bit, just so you can see the outline. You'll see here actually in the resume item code. You'll see here too. I'm using div tables, so dividers rather than table elements for the HTML code, because this allows it to be responsive. And then I'm using CSS classes. And so if I go down here, you'll see I've created a CSS style sheet called resume. And this CSS style sheet is then using display functions like dot container for the class of that style. That's saying make it flexible. Push this element to the left. Push this element to the right. When you have a URL, I want the actual URL to be black until you hover over it, and then I want it to be blue. And so that's what the CSS is doing. So that's how that functionality is happening there. So if I scroll back up and I look at that role and I hit preview again, you'll see this is why it's not a traditional blue URL first, because I don't want it to be, because that would be distracting. You know, I want it to be black first. And then you'll see I've got my role and the dates. And you'll notice here it says present and the role. So let me pop down and show you that. So if I go down to back to my template. Oh, let me show you one other trick while we're at it, because so I don't have to be scrolling up and down all the time. So if you right mouse click on an item and open it up in text window, I can actually open up the template in a separate window. This is a nice little hacky trick. So I can have the template in a separate window. And so that way I could be, you know, having the note I'm looking on and having the template side by side, and I don't have to be doing that scrolling up back and forth all the time. So that's a nice little trick that you can use. So what you're seeing here, what was I going to show? Oh yeah, so the date. So you'll see here, here's my start date and here's the never date. But you see the start date value has a timestamp on it. So if I go and look in preview, but when I preview it, only the year, the month and the year are being shown. So the question is, well, how do you do that? So if I scroll down into my template, you'll see here I've got variable list. If end date is never, then I want you to make end date equal present, meaning I'm still involved in the job. Else, if the v end date equals else, I want you to make the v end date variable equal to the end date plus the month and the year formatted in you know, I don't know what you call that type of formatting in 1/2024, for example. If I wanted to actually change that formatting, let's say I go ahead and change this M to a Y, and we do it again, you'll see that was because that was the end date, sorry. And there's no value in end date right now. So if I go down to the start date, yeah, down here, here's my start date. So if I were to change that M to a Y on the start date, same methodology, and I show you this, you'll now see it's gone down to 13, not 2013. So these are called, in I guess coding parlance, these little elements here, M/Y, are called flags. And these different flags that you can put and I've closed my browser and I don't want to open it up, because if I open it up, I'll open up all 200 tabs in my Chrome again. Mr. Anderson will drop in the ATBref URL in the chat, and you'll see all of it. Here's another really important thing, because of the graciousness that is the essence of Mr. Anderson. You don't have to remember any of this because it's in ATBref. So you do it enough, you'll get some muscle memory to remember some of these flags, but invariably I forget them all the time. So I'm constantly looking at ATBref to kind of check what is that flag, what is this flag. So and we'll pull those back up when I'm done, but I don't want to slow my computer down. So understanding these different flag toggles are really really valuable and helpful. So that's how you can kind of play with that formatting, and that's how, you know, in that, you know, that's the function within the template that's making these kind of elements different outputted. Now, remember, I have these booleans. So let's say I'm in my note and it says, here are all of my different accomplishments. So if I go here and I go back up to the accomplishments list, essentially what I'm saying is, hey, Tinderbox, go ahead and collect all the children and who is no show title equals false, and grab their names, and then go ahead and give me a bulleted list. And why is that is no show title equals false? So if I go here and I say is yes show accomplishments, and I do that, I'm now going to get a bulleted list of my accomplishments and a little heading on that. And so let's go ahead back into the template. How's that happening? You'll see right here, it's collecting all of those children, all those lists. It's creating an HTML bulleted list. It's then sticking in the word accomplishment highlights. It's italicizing that, and then it's sticking it into the output because I've got down here in the template, it says, V value accomplishment. And so if is show complement, so essentially my code saying if is yes show accomplishments, the Boolean trigger is saying if this is true, go and collect that list, stick that list into the value v accomplishments, and then the template populates that value that value right down in here. And that's how that is getting populated. Now, let's say for whatever reason I didn't want to go ahead and add this is no show. I didn't want to include, and remember at the very beginning I said when you're doing your CV, when you're setting up the collection stage of your work, dump everything in there, even if you don't think you'll ever want to really use it, because there's no harm, no foul. So let's say I did not want, I had this item, member of the Assurant Digital Advisory Board, advised Assurant Executive Suite. So let's say I didn't want to have, I wanted to remember that was an accomplishment that I had done in the past, but I didn't want to delete it, but I don't want it to be shown in this output. So because of the way I've structured my template, I can just check that one, go back to here, and you'll now see it's gone. And if I go back and uncheck it again, you'll now see it's back. So that's the power of using the output of the Tinderbox templates, is you have this like Boolean control to have all of your collection and your creation and all of your ideas in the tool, and then you use templates to selectively determine what you want to have included in your output or not. So again, and it will take time for this to kind of all sink in and make sense, but does generally that methodology, that concept make sense? Thumbs up?
It's great, Michael. It might. I'm not sure, but could we see the export tab also once in a while, just to kind of,
yeah,
glue it all together?
Yeah. So what you're doing here, this is your preview, and if I pop over to the export tab, I'm now getting HTML ready, perfect code. Right. So let's go ahead and let me walk you through that. So what we'll do is we'll go down here, and we'll go look at my template. And so if I'm looking, I need to go down the bottom because I want to show you the top. So template number 1 is saying. And in Tinderbox, you can do this in functions. You can do it in the template itself. I've got some muscle memory to do it in the template myself, so that's where I put it. But if I go down here and you say, you can put in your templates in action, and this is basically putting action code in your templates versus export code, which I'll show you in just a second. So this is saying generate some headings for me, produce my short title stuff. This is just background stuff I do for my own work. Then this is where an HTML page opens up. So the structure of every HTML page that's out there in the world, as driven by the WC3 standards for HTML, says an HTML page opens with an HTML tag and closes with a closing HTML tag. Then it says, give me the head, tell me what kind of page it is, let me know whether or not you want to have a style sheet included within this page. And you'll notice here, I'm telling Tinderbox, go grab the styles from the style sheet called CSS resume. So it's going to this file here and grabbing the text of this file CSS resume and sticking it in here. And then I'm saying, and then I'm closing out the head. So this is like the invisible structure that's behind the scenes in an HTML page. And then everything in between the body tags is what's going to be visually shown to the user when they're actually looking at the page. And then this is the text that will go in that process. So this is what's happening here. And then the same structure is going to happen with the other notes up here. So if I now go up to my note and I say identity praxis, you'll see, and we look at export code, here's the HTML tag, here's the header information. And then remember, my Tinderbox says, stick the CSS code here. So here's all the CSS that was in that other file called CSS. Right, so that's where that information is coming from. And then I say, close the style, close the head, and then I'm opening up the body tag. And then all of those other sub templates are then entering the div tags, putting it in. And here it's where it's giving me my bulleted list. Now, this is interesting. And Art, I'm glad you suggested this, because right now I'm looking at this and you see UL tag, lead tag, and it's technically correct, but it's difficult to read. So let's modify on the fly, because I wasn't really doing it for, let's modify on the fly to be able to fix that, to make it a little bit easier to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up into my code and I'm going to say via accomplishment, when you see a UL tag, after that UL tag, I want you to add a line break. And this is a regular expression for line break.
It's not a regular expression. It's just how you signal it. It's slightly different. It's used in regular expressions, but important to understand it's just how you signal to the application that you want a line break or a \t as a tab.
But just to remember, that's common across most application software. /n means line break, /t means tab. And so then I'm going to indent this in three dots, and I'm going to say when you have a li, I want you to then enter in a li, add in the item that I'm sticking in, then add in the closing tag, and then I want to, whoops, I don't want to do that. I want you to add in a line break here, and then when you're done, I want you to add a line break here. Whoops, I keep hitting paste. Line break here. So essentially, I'm telling Tinder, and again, the HTML doesn't care. But for our visual rendering, having these spaces helps us read. So now if I go back up to identity praxis and I do the preview, our preview looks exactly the same. But now if I go to my export, you'll see I've now got line breaks to be able to see my code here a little bit. And I can go back and fix it a little bit more, where I can say I want a line break in front of the I want a line break in front of the first URL, the first UL. So here you see in the code, there's no line break in front of that UL tag right there. But for ease of use, I want one. So now if I go and re-render it, you'll now see I've got a line break. So here's my list. UL, first item, second item, third item, fourth item, and then the closing of the UL. So that's just, and so you'll see that just adding in those little line breaks does nothing to the output, does nothing to the visual, but to Art's point, super, super helpful when, and again, this is something that Mark Anderson had to beat into me probably over 18 to 24 months. I'm a little dense at times, but he's like, stop looking at preview. If something's not working in your preview, because remember, Tinderbox preview is not a full browser. It's more of just to give you, it's just a preview. But when you're looking at preview, if it's not what you expect, then look at the export code, and this is really what's happening. And again, and Mark and I, if we have time today, will demonstrate a bug that I uncovered earlier this week. A super, super weird edge case that I'm probably the first person ever to have tried. And we found an edge case, and it was export code that helped us to sleuth it out. So Mr. Art, was that helpful? I'm going to assume so and move on.
Oh yeah, my unmute wasn't working. Yeah, it was great. Thank you. Because it also helps me sort of tie in everything what you're doing and how the template affects the source text.
And while we're at it too, by the way, let's talk about ways of getting this out. Let's say I wanted to get this item out of Tinderbox. I could come up here and I could say export as HTML, as an outline, or as text. So I'm going to go ahead and hit export as text, and I'm going to drop, or as HTML, and I'm going to drop this into my downloads folder. Okay, so I've just exported this. I exported the whole thing as HTML. That's fine. So it's now exporting the whole element as HTML. I could have also gone to export selected note. And if I exported selected note as HTML in my downloads folder, so you'll see two things that I just did. So I exported the whole item. I go to my downloads now, and I hit date added. right? So here are all of the export files that I just exported out of the item. And if I just click on one of them, it will open up in a browser, and I shouldn't have done that because that's now going to open
I
Chrome.
was just going to say.
Everything down. So we're not going to do that. I'm not going to show you that. Now, actually, what I'll do is I will copy this path and I will open. By the way, a little trick too, if people don't know this, in your path down here, if you do view, where's path? Hide path bar. This path bar, you can show your path bar. So if you're selecting on an item, you can then go here and then hit copy, and then you can use this to copy the path of an item. So if I do that, now I'm going to go back here and paste this into my Firefox. Allow. You now see I copied the path to that file, and I now can see that entire web page that I've just exported out to Tinderbox. So that's a really nice way of doing it. Mr. Anderson, you had your hand hold, and I'll show you one other element.
Well, I was just making a note to say that when you export a single note, just bear in mind that Tinderbox will assume that you've already exported at least once.
Yes.
The whole document. Where that can bite you is you're doing something, you just export it and think, you do the preview and that looks all wrong because you haven't exported, say, the CSS note that the exported HTML was expecting to find on the hard drive.
Right. So yeah, so those are nuanced details that we can address in future elements, but it's nice to bring it up so that if you're playing around with stuff and like, why is this not working? I'm an idiot. Well, it's because there's other elements to the training that we need to think through. The other thing to think about, and this is, again, a little bit more of an advanced element, but it gets to show you the quick and dirty. I've got stamps that I use automatic export, and I've got stamps that will trigger the voice of Tinderbox of my Mac to say, great job, Becker. You're really doing well. Nice work. So I actually have the computer talk to me because it gets kind of lonely at night sometimes. But the other way to go about doing this is because this is HTML ready to go, I can copy this HTML and stick it into any system like BBEdit. So let's say I go over to BBEdit. So I'm going to copy the HTML and paste that into, come on. I'm going to go here. I'm going to copy identity praxis. I'm going to look at the output of the HTML. I'm going to select all of this HTML. Slow it down a little bit. Copy. So I'm going to do a Control A, or Command A for copy all, a Command V for copy, and I'm now going to paste all of that HTML into the file. And now I'm going to save this file as save idp.html. And the application I'm using in this case is BBEdit, but it could be any text editor you want. So I can do that. And then so there's that file we just saved. And again, we can copy path. We don't want to click it because I don't want to open it at my default Google. I can go back to Firefox, paste in that path. And there is the HTML file that we've just created and saved. So that's another way to get it out. But we want to get it into Word. So there's a variety of things you can do. One thing, you can go into Word and you can hit open. So I think this should work. If I go to open and I go to my downloads, just added, and I open up the page, you see it doesn't open because Word doesn't convert it. So there are other ways to go about doing that. One of a really fun way to do it, and it's not very difficult, is to use the command line. And again, I have stamps that control all of this command line. But check this out. If I go CD downloads, okay, now I'm in downloads. Now I've installed an application called Pandoc, which, just like Microsoft Word, runs on my computer, but it's a command line application as opposed to an application like Word, which has a UI to it. So I'm going to type the word Pandoc. And what am I going to ask Pandoc to do? I'm going to ask Pandoc to take a standalone file, and that's an example of a flag, just like we had the M and the Y for year and date. These are the same examples of flags. So I'm going to say take the standalone file, and I want you to take the standalone file. What do we call it? We call it IDP. Take the standalone file idp.html, and I want you to output that standalone file to idp.docx. Okay, now there's a lot more detail and controls and templating you can do with this. But essentially what I'm doing is I copied out that HTML, I stuck it into BBEdit, saved it as an HTML file. I had already pre-installed the application called Pandoc, which is open source. And I'm now running the command line, and I'm telling my computer, convert the standalone file IDP HTML to a Word document, and I hit enter. Okay. And you look, it just created a Word document for me. And if I open it up, there's the Word document. All right. Now, once you've done that, you'll need some basic modification, like and stuff that I've not yet necessarily figured out, but like Word doesn't like the div structure, and it does a terrible job with tables too. So there will be some like manual stuff if I really do want the city there. There'll be some manual kind of triage that you'll want to do once you get it into Word, but this is just so much easier to go about this process. And again, that's a whole other class we can do on using Pandoc and such. But again, I just kind of wanted to show you that end-to-end element and process, how we can use those elements. Make sense?
Yep.
All right, so let's go back to what we were doing. So I've got now let me show you some of the other controls that are helpful here. So now as I was playing around with it, I wanted to do some little tricks. So let's say I don't want to show so let's say I also want to show do I not have show client? Okay, here's I was playing with the template right before I did it. And I don't have show client in here. So let me go ahead and just add it. I could also add it to the yes clients. I could also add it to the prototype if I wanted to. But in this case, so now I want to say, yes, I want to show the clients too. So if I do that, you'll now see it is showing my advisory clients. Here's my current advisory clients and the dates I'm working with them. Here's the previous advisory clients that I've worked with. So I have this, I've programmed in this flexibility, and where those clients are coming from is, here's the list of the clients. Here's the list of all of their different details and dates and the kinds of stuff I've done for them. And I'm just telling Tinderbox, and let me go back to the template. Same thing like doing the capturing the accomplishments. We're doing the same thing to capture the clients, but a little bit different. So in this case, grab a list of clients, but it's collect if the type is client and it is current is true. So if this case, if I go down to my clients and I say it's assurant, is current is true and the type is client. So I want you to do that versus this one is client it's a type client, but it's not current. I'm no longer working with them. So that's the way to kind of build that list. And then I'm telling Tinderbox then in the template then to populate those different variables in that template. So that gives you that structure on how to do that. So if I go back to here, so then that's creating the v not client value versus the v current value. I then populate that in the variable v client, advisory client, current. Here's the populating of that v current client. Here's the populating of the v not current client. And then this complete construct v client, if it has a value, will get automatically put into the text right there. So that's how those, again, it's like a big puzzle that you're just taking its pieces and reconstructing them however way you like. Now here's a fun little piece too that I really liked in constructing the job role. Very often we will have more than one more than one role with the job, especially if we worked in it for a long time. So, and I'll show you an example of that earlier or later, but I just put this in here, so is current, test. And so here's some test roles that I may have had for this particular job. So if I go up here and I say is yes roles, what I'm telling Tinderbox, so if I don't have that checked, it's just grabbing the current title from this note right here. Right. And if I look at the template, remember it's all you're using the templates to determine what your output's going to be. So if I go down here to the roles, I'm saying, get me the list of anything whose type is role. And if the end date is never, then I want you to populate it and do that. And if it doesn't have those, then I want you just to include the main title. So that's what all this content is saying. So if I go up here and say include the roles, you'll now see that Tinderbox is now going to populate those two roles from 7/24 to 7/24. And again, let's look at the dates. 7/23 for a better, this might be for a better demo. Let's say I had that role for a year and that was role 1. This is a great example of incremental formalization. That is role 2. That makes more sense. So when I go here, you'll see that, and I still didn't do it right. Oh, sorry, okay. I'll have to double check that. All right, I may have messed up some code there, but you see that idea. So I'll double check, make sure those dates get done before I put up the test file. So that's an example of how that works. So I don't want to have the roles there. And I'll just say cut all that up and I turn off those booleans off. And now I just simply get that standard element. So because I spent, and here's a really important thing with Tinderbox, because you might say, well, why did you spend all of that time for that one job identity praxis? And you'll spend all that time in Word. Think about all the time you spent making formatting in Word. Well, then, by doing that time in Tinderbox once in a template, I then have a pattern, a template that I can use and now apply for every job. Right? I don't have to do that work again. And now in order to change the outputs and the look and feels, all I need to do is flip the different booleans to make that work. Likewise, I can leverage that same functionality for the different, for like my volunteering jobs. So for example, at the Direct Marketing Association, I had over years a variety of different roles. For the Mobile Marketing Association, I had a ton of different roles. And you'll notice here from an outlining structure, for whatever reason, and I was just going fast, I put these underneath roles. But on these, I didn't. Tinderbox doesn't care because it's only focused on the type. So if I wanted to, I could have stuck a container called roles if I liked that kind of hierarchical physical structure. But all Tinderbox is doing what I tell it to. When I'm telling it in the template is go grab the children or descendants of this note whose type is roles and do something with it. And it will ignore this container for these roles because this doesn't have the role. And I can just put a role here called folder, a type called folder. This doesn't, its type is not a role, so it's going to ignore it. And these two have types. And so it will do it. And so when I look at that one, I then have it give me all of the roles for that different job or role, and I can present them. And just like before, as I was doing before, if I don't want to include one of those roles, I could say, and I don't have it visually shown here, but I can say is no show title. And if I uncheck this global vice chairman role, maybe I haven't done that one yet in that example. So, but I could add that code in really quick that says, if no show title for the global that role, take it out. But I didn't bother putting that functionality in at this point. But it'd be easy to mix and match and copy that. So that's how I'm handling the various job functions and job roles. Same thing with employment history. Now, same thing with my notable experiences and such. Now, where it gets a little interesting is if I go down into my, awards and such, this is a little different. You'll see I get these bulleted lists. For convenience sake, I have built a different template for myself. So there's a whole different, a variety of different ways to build lists in Tinderbox. the first way I was showing you was to build lists like these little smaller lists like this. But what I found over time is I tend to want to kind of be able to convert notes from lists all the time. So I created myself a function called list children advanced. So what this function does is it actually generates lists for me on the fly. And again, I'm not going to go line by line by the code, but if you go up here and look at this, let's say I'm looking at this item called commercial, and I uncheck these two booleans and I view it. I'm now getting all of the children notes as different notes. And to Art's point, let's look at the HTML. There's the CSS, and now it's giving me, item 1. Scroll down. Here's item 1. It's heading 3. Heading 3. So it's giving me all of the items using heading numbers. But because I've built that function in Tinderbox that says in my template, if I have is show children, is yes list children set, my template in Tinderbox is saying ignore, rather than show me, rather than put all of the children as heading 1, 2s, or 3s, use bulleted lists. And so if I check that boolean, I now get a bulleted list. But you'll see I still have all of the children notes. And so I'm going to say, well, Tinderbox, what I really want you to do is give me the bulleted list, but don't show the children. So I do that, and now the children go away. So I get all of this ultimate flexibility in how I want to manage my output by using this Boolean strategy for elementing. Now I don't think I've, and so some of these I have text. So I went a little bit farther too, and I said, if the bullet has text, then include the text for that bullet. So now I'm getting a bulleted list plus its explanatory text. And the part of the reason why I did this is that way I can actually use Tinderbox to help me build my PowerPoint files, my PowerPoint slides. So because I can now just copy this text and copy these bullets over into a PowerPoint file, or use Pandoc to export my notes out of Tinderbox and into, and just like I created that Word file using Pandoc, I can create PowerPoint files using Pandoc too. So I can take that text and then generate PowerPoint files out of, using this exact same process. So that gives you a different methodology or look on how I go about and create lists in Tinderbox. So for my awards, I'm basically just saying, just create me these 2 lists. And you'll notice that these are all highlighted, and I suspect this is an artifact from copying and pasting. Yeah, there's no, that should have gone there. Yeah, okay. Now this is interesting. Even though there's no URL in any of these notes, at least I don't see it. Let me go ahead and add a URL. We're just testing on the fly here. I suspect, yeah, even though there's no URL in here, when I preview it, Tinderbox thinks there is one, because that's the way I structured the HTML. Because if we look at it, the HTML is basically giving me the anchor tags, but and it's sticking, for whatever reason, it's sticking a trademark thing in there. It's probably got something in memory. So that's something I got to tweak. I've got some artifact code here. But sometimes when you see the so if you see something like this too, there's for some reason some errant element there. I can select all of those notes, go like this, create a quick stamp, and say URL equals nothing. Go like that. And so I've now cleaned out the URL. And so now that I've cleaned out that URL variable, all of that's cleaned up. So that's kind of like the incremental cleanup that you might want to do with leveraging a process like that. And where that URL came from, I think, was here. Is I accidentally didn't paste the trademark URL that I wanted to put in my trademark identity practice into the right place. That's how that happened. Actually, I think where it came from. I'll figure that out later. So that's how I did the awards listing. And then down in my research, teaching, and other elements, I went ahead and, again, it's all of the same things. Populate the different elements, talk about the different courses that I've taught, talk about the different international and national events I've programmed, stick in. And again, this is where, if I'm using Word, I may not put my work in progress in every resume that I put out, but it's not a bad idea to have a place for that. So if somebody asks me, what are you working on? I've got it. So I'm going to maintain this work in progress section here, or books that are in publication, or things of that nature. So for like Mary McCabe's on the call with me right now, and she and I are working on the 11th edition of Mobile Marketing Essentials. So I went ahead and put that in here. I then stuck in my teaching narrative, my introductions and how I like to teach. And then this is a bit of a hack, but I went through and went into my Zotero, and I got all of my citations, or all of the references for the publications that I've done. And I didn't have time because then I only had about 2 days to pull all this together. So I just grabbed all of the references and stuck them in as notes. Later, when I have time, I'm gonna run some regex that will let me parse out the publisher name, the title of the event, the dates, the speakers. I'll populate those into attribute values. And so then in the future, I'll be able to say, how many events did I do? How many publications have I done for Mobile Ecosystem Forum? What dates did I do them for that particular institution versus another? Who did I write articles with? So I didn't have time to deal with that this week, but at least I've got the information in here, and later I'll be able to use Tinderbox to parse this text out and populate it into attributes. And that will be an incremental formalization step I'll do. Likewise, here are the 10 journals that I've helped found and edit. And then here are the 500 or so, or actually, what's the number? I'm missing a couple hundred at least. If I go like here, child count. Here are 422 of my speaking engagements I've given over the years, right? So you're able to populate that into Tinderbox, and now I have my complete CV. If I go here, like we did here, there is all of the HTML for that CV, just like you saw in the Word file. And because I didn't have time to debug my script, and actually there's something interesting I'll show you in this output. This is a great example of, no, we're okay. Yeah. So, oh, I must have fixed that. That is working. Okay. And I got that trademark bug here I've interjected in here somewhere. But you'll see I'm now getting all of my work, and I've got all the good looks and feel there. I could easily just go ahead like we did here, hit export, do copy paste, go over to BBEdit, hit new, pop this over here, pop that into there, hit save, test7.html, paste it into downloads because we know what we're doing. We'll pop over to iTerm, open up ourselves a new shell, and we'll say CD downloads. And let's see, what do we call it again? It's capital test7. It's case sensitive. So if I go Pandoc, standalone, test7.html, output, test, and you can have it any name you want, resume 7.docx. That's spelled right? No. All right. Oh, I didn't do it right. Sorry. Pandoc. Output standalone test7.html, and then we'll call it resume 8.docx. No S. does not exist. Let me try once more and then we'll quit. Downloads. Oh, sorry. Pandoc test 7.html. Output, I don't have to do the S all the time. Output, we'll just do test 7.docs. There we go. Right? Like that. And we now have that entire file outputted to Microsoft Word. Okay, so that's how you get a really, and then you'll go through and you'll do some manual formatting because and Microsoft in all of its glory does not necessarily follow industry standards. It often will try to set its own, and it has been a beast since the 1990s. And so, you know, to their credit, they've done a pretty good job trying to stay up, but things like divs, things like table formatting, some of the style sheeting doesn't naturally propagate itself through. And in previous webinars done as well, I've demonstrated some tricks on how to force Microsoft to adopt the styling you want, but we don't have time to review that today. So, but this does show you how you can get what you need into Microsoft, into Word, and then you can just do some manual adjustments and send it out. So that's a great example of that. But the average person, the average job, the average person you're interacting with is not going to want a 45-page CV from you. You know, the academics were all pontificators, as Mr. Peterson knows, as the fellow doctor. We get pretty good at pontification. So, you know, you're not going to want all of that detail all of the time in an actual resume. So let me show you what I did to do that. So in order to create my resume, I have all of this information, everything I want in my CV. So then I'm going to say, okay, well, what are the things that I actually want to copy over into the resume that I don't want to change? So Tinderbox has a capability called aliasing. So if you hit Command L, or you go up to, how do you create an alias? I just know what's the menu for where the aliases are?
It's Command L.
I know, but where in the menu is it? Oh, here you go.
No, I think it's Note.
Under Edit, make alias.
All right.
Right. So if you create an alias, and I can move that then anywhere in the file I want. So now I've got it twice. So I'll just delete the second one. What an alias is doing is essentially creating a proxy to a note. So if I go down here and change the alias, and then I go back down to its original, you see that the original is actually changed too. And if I change the original, and I go look at the alias, you'll see the alias has now changed. And you can have multiple aliases for an individual note. So you can, you know, so if I wanted to make another alias of this note and move it over here, you'll now see if I change this note, both aliases have taken on that new change. And if I change either of the aliases, you'll see that the original has changed. So the aliasing becomes a really powerful way of like propagating your notes into different outputs. So I want the title to be the same. I want the summary to be the same. The employment history, I do not, because I don't necessarily need to provide the detail for every bit of employment because I'm trying to keep it to 3 pages. So here what I've done is I want the identity praxis element to be clean, but I want all of those booleans shut off. So I'm just getting the high level summary of it. And then on the teaching, what I want to do is I want to talk about where I've taught. And so I'm going to go ahead and manually type that in. Now in this, and I left it this way just so you can see it. In this example, you know, I just opened up my employment history and then just picked and cherry picked the dates and manually typed that in. Super easy, it was fast. So I can have an element of teaching. On my prior history though, look at the way I did this. I said, I was and I have a thing now called value string. So you can ask yourself, well, what's going on there? So what's happening there is I'm running an edict, just like I was showing you before on the list. An edict is a way of running action code about once an hour or so in the background. When Tinderbox has time, it'll run it, and that's about once an hour. If you have your action code and rules, that's running every few seconds. So I have an edict that's saying, go collect the notes of this number. Well, what is that number? That's the ID number for, so if you look, 061 is the ID number for this note. So if I do that, you'll see that I'm in prior employment. Yeah, that should work. Oh yeah, so 406 is the ID number of prior employment, and you see 406 is the ID number I have in my in my note on this prior. And so I'm telling, for this note called prior employment, what I'm asking you to do is go collect the list of the children from the note, this note, and only grab the items that is current. And then what I want you to do is, and grab its ID number. I then want you to create a list, you know, for those items. Oh, that's prior employment. I see what I'm doing wrong. And then stick that in the note value string. So when I render this, Tinderbox goes out, and I broke it because I knew that didn't make sense. So if I go here, prior employment, copy. I was messing around with some code earlier, and I was grabbing the wrong note. So that note, and now if I run the action code, I must have broke this right before the class. Let me show you my education history. I did the same thing here. I'll show you in skills. So I did the same thing in skills, and I built two different lists, and it's going out to the skills notes. And so rather than, and this is an example of when Mark was talking about creating different attributes, I created two attributes called skills tech and skills soft. So I could populate those. And here I'm saying, here's where I want my technical skills to go. Here's where I want my soft skills to go. I'm telling Tinderbox to go generate me lists from the children of technical skills and soft skills. So when this note renders, it's actually pulling out and populating that note for me. And then similarly, I'm doing the same thing for my professional scholarly interests and the same thing for my publications. So rather than having people read all 500 of my publications, getting a whole list of them, I'm just changing the language. You know, I support Tools for Thought Community Tinderbox. I'm the ID and chair from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. I've previously done these different types of volunteering jobs. You know, and I can say, if you want more detail, give me detail. Now down here, you can see what's going on here. In Tinderbox 10, we introduced a new concept called expressions. So I'm asking Tinderbox, go get me the children notes, the child count for this note. And this note are all of the events, industry events that I programmed, and I'm getting the number 9. So I know that I programmed 9 events. Now, currently in Tinderbox, expressions introduced in this way do not export. So I have to manually put in the word 9 right next to it. So when I run it, you'll actually see that it's showing 9 events. I believe Mark is working on the punch list that will enable expressions like this use to be exported. So this way, I've been able to take all of this information I've developed in the CV using aliases, aliasing in some action code, and clearly I need to fix whatever I broke here today, but I demonstrated the skills that you see it can work. So that way now, when I'm rendering my this CV, you'll see I'm getting a shorter version of it. And it's like, this is a 3-page versus a 45-page version of the CV. And that, you know, and again, we've got about 4 minutes left. But that is how I would recommend you building a CV in Tinderbox. Now, other things that you might want to think about, like I've created, what are my unique qualities and skills? So I've produced a list for that. I've created like, what are my weaknesses and what can I work on? I've also created, I think it's down in the resources, you know, things I want to learn and do. So a list of different, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have any professional certificates. So now that my doctorate's done, I want to go get an IAPP privacy certificate. I want to go get a HubSpot certification. So these are some of the things that I'm going to be wanting to work on. So in my resume Tinderbox file, I think that's a natural place to put those kinds of things. I also listed, I went out and grabbed a list of all of the different countries of the world. And and this was just grabbing a CSV file and paste from, I think like one of the, some country listing website, pulled that into Tinderbox, went through and added a boolean yes has been. And then I ran a quick Tinderbox agent here. So that tells me, countries I've traveled to. And so it's now telling me how many countries I traveled to. So then if I say is our child count, I can display the child count. And so I can see that I've been to 54 countries. And now I can now use that somewhere else in my CV or my bio. Maybe keep track of things that inspire you, different people, different concepts. So this is just a really nice way to have all aspects of your history and what you're working on professionally or scholarly all in one place, but demonstrating how you can summarize that detail up into a smaller file. So that's how to build a resume and a CV in Tinderbox in 90 minutes. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, concepts, ideas? Jane, was this helpful for your thought and understanding in Tinderbox? Maybe in our last couple of minutes, what are some of your key takeaways? You're on mute.
Basically being able to include things from one place to another.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have to work through it is all.
Yeah. And that's what did Ted Nelson call that? Transclusion. And in Tinderbox we call it inclusion. That was kind of one of the early hypertext, the inventions from 50 years ago that now, because of Mark Bernstein, we're actually able to relatively easily do. Mr. Gale, you often have nice reactions to things like this. What's your
the fact that I'm completely exhausted right now. This is, you know what, it's so impressive, I have to say, Michael. And not just the technical part. I mean, oh, come on, 54 countries. That's a lofty number for me. I was starting to count in my head. I don't think I can get past 14. Watching the structure of this and seeing how you're basically making an entire database library on a specific topic, but a very broad topic. So you do it kind of a once and done, and then you simply are doing addendums. So that's very appealing. And you've done the hard work for it. I think about my what it would take for me to replicate that. I don't think my resume is going to change into that format, but at the same time, it's a wonderful tutorial.
Well, and again, the whole point is, as I said in the beginning, well, first and foremost, thank you for that in the kind remarks. But the point is, it doesn't have to be a resume. It could be a report. It could be a book. It could be an article. It's anything. These are all the fundamental skills that can be applied to really any project in Tinderbox.
No, it's a nice, it easily transports from one concept to another, and I appreciate that.
Awesome.
One question I did have, and I think I haven't wrapped my brain around it fully. Since a Boolean is a yes, no.
True, false. More appropriately, true, false.
Okay, true, false. So by going is true or is yes as you have it, is no, that almost seems to me to be it's a layer I don't fully understand, as opposed to just checking on and off to indicate its presence.
Well, it took me a while to grok this myself, because I wanted to be able to not have to throw stuff away, because I'm kind of a pack rat when it comes to that. I wanted to have all of the ideas, like even down into like the awards section. If I go down here, in high school, I won the Robert Delaney Leadership Award in my high school, and he was a kid that was killed in Vietnam in 1967, and he played on the high school football team, and so I was bestowed on that reward from Robert Delaney, and it's kind of fun to be able to 40 something years later to be able to give honor to the guy who this award honored. And I would have forgotten that if I didn't have it in my resume, but I don't necessarily need to show it. So I'm going to go ahead and just, is no show title and turn it off. And so essentially what I'm saying is, I'm saying when I'm rendering, I'm setting this flag to true, which means don't show this,
No, I understand that part.
right? And so if I go down into the templates, Tinderbox has two kinds of action, two types of code. You've got your export code and your action codes. And in it's like pages, I've simply stuck in your items. I've simply stuck in here if I put in conditions. If this is if is no show title equals false, then show, and then so if it's false, then perform that function.
Right.
So I think
If it's true, then don't skip it.
I understand that part. The more global is, since it's a Boolean operator, why not just stick with the initial true false? But you have a reason for it. I understand.
Well, I mean, part of it is personal convention. Like, I don't want this to. I want this to keep shorter. I could say is true, yes, is no, but it's also yes, no's. And like when I first did this, I didn't fully understand Booleans, so I was doing yes, no in my head. But now I've got technical debt in that I don't want to go and re-engineer all of my action code to true, or all of my attribute names to true and false, which would then require me to change all of my text. So that's why I've just kind of stuck with the yes, no's and the attribute names.
Oh,
Well,
no, I'm fine with that. If I get a choice, I'm going to withdraw my comment.
No, don't withdraw it, but yeah, it's good. I'm sure it helps somebody else along the way. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, well, I've just added a comment. I mean, the thing with Booleans is find a naming style that works for you. One of the things to bear in mind is that if you create a Boolean and you don't do anything else to it, its default value is false. Now, it's up to you. You could say, well, I'll make it true, because what I want to record is something that's normally true, but then every note saves that true. So there's an old-fashioned style, and you'll see that in some of the way the Tinderbox Booleans work. So one of them is there's an attribute called HTML don't export, which seems odd having that as the title, but that's because by default all pages are exported. So if you don't want to do what is the default, you set HTML don't export, and when you sort of tick that, then when you see it, it's true, or it has a tick box, which therefore makes sense in the context of the naming. So looping back round, there isn't a right way to do this. Just pick something that makes sense, and don't feel obliged that the default condition is sort of no or false. If it makes more sense for you to create an attribute that's normally true, and you only want to record when it's false, that's fine. The key thing with a Boolean is, because it is a yes, no, just make sure that the naming matches the way you've done it. Now, a place where this confuses people is that if you look at something like the rule inspector, there's a little tick box in the bottom left-hand corner that says enabled. What that actually sets is a rule called disabled, because by default all rules are enabled, and they're only turned off if you set rule disabled to true. So you can see how it can get a bit confusing, but the point is, the underlying point is just take a pause when setting these things up to make sure that the naming that you've chosen makes sense to you, not necessarily anybody else, and that it reflects the underlying true false state. Because ideally you want it's helpful if for most notes you never have to set this. So what you're normally trying to do with a Boolean is you're trying to spot the exceptions. So in the case of the exporting from Tinderbox, for instance, you only set HTML don't export for notes that you know you don't want to be exported. And then you can expand that pattern to your own work. Does that help, Bruce?
Okay. And by the way, Jane's got another question.
That's fine.
Jane says, suppose I have outputs and I have an alias in both, but I want a Boolean true in one and false in the other. Thoughts on how to do that? Well, I think you naturally got to the point one, you can't, because the alias will, both aliases will map back to the original. And if you set them true or false, that would propagate to all of them. So the way I would go about doing that is I would generate a new original note in each of the two places. And then for me, there is a, and I can, if you guys want to stay over 5 minutes, 10 minutes more, I can show you a methodology I was doing, because I was just thinking about that on my walk this morning, Jane. There is a operator in Tinderbox called links. And so you create a new note, and then you tell Tinderbox what information you want to pull from one note into another. And so you basically you're basically replicating the values of one note into another, into that new original note, to which you now can have booleans on and off. And so in that context, it's like creating a proxy note that's will be inheriting the information via the link operator into the note. And it might be easier if I just demonstrate it. And I think that, because I think this is a really,
Right, that's what I wanted to get at.
I think this is a really powerful thing. The other thing I wanted to do is, if you notice during my demos, I tried to hand wave it and like, oh, figure it out later. So if you remember, for whatever reason, there was URLs all over the place at one point. Well, that's because I made the mistake of, in my P page prototype, I typed in my trademark URL, and that then propagated that trademark URL into every single prototype. So if I delete that and put that one just into my trademark identity praxis, now those URLs that were propagating everywhere will have disappeared. The second thing is, if I wanted to show you how I fixed this. Remember, I was saying, oh, and look at my employment, and I just saw these things, and I hand waved that away because I wanted to keep on with the training. But I figured out what the problem is. If you look at my code, just before class, I fixed this. I accidentally stuck an errant plus in front of the name. So if I get rid of that plus in front of those names and now run it again, it now says I was going to get university, blah, blah, blah. So I'm able to, and I messed it up because I wanted that, I need titles, but you'll see that's why that wasn't propagating properly. So because I messed up the code. And let's give you that other demo really quick. And then while I'm setting this up, Steve, Art, you had a question?
Actually, a comment about naming booleans.
Yeah.
If at all possible, avoid nots, negation in the boolean, and you can, when you set up your attribute, you can set the default value. So if by avoiding nots, you would prefer the default value to be true, you can set that up for your own attributes. System attributes, that's all on Mark Bernstein. But there is a default value that you can set for your own user attributes. So nots often confuse even the author of the user attribute. So it just requires an extra cycle to think through it. So my recommendation is avoid negation in booleans.
Yep. Yep. And again, it's just, it becomes your convention. So Art, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that isn't it possible, say, in answer to Jane's question about if you want an alias to have a Boolean set one way for one and differently for another, isn't it possible to use an abstraction and then take, say, example, a rule or an edict and go, well, if this is true, then X is what you need to do. And you have a different rule or edict that goes, if X is false, then this is what you need to do.
Yeah,
you are not actually changing the value of the Boolean, but your whatever further action that you want that Boolean to perform for you is taken care of in action code.
Yeah, no, you could. You're absolutely right. But the problem with that is that gets super squirrely, because you're creating a context for that particular moment. And for me, in my experience has been, if you've built a bunch of templates around these Boolean formats, and then you're doing that kind of if then context in that moment, the likelihood that you'll be breaking the templates is becomes far greater.
But Michael, you can abstract. What you can do is you can abstract, because a question you can ask is instead of asking about the actual Boolean, where you would ask what is the value of my Boolean, you could say if the parent, or if I am descended from this container, or I have this condition, then the answer is true. If it's some other condition, or if I'm just not the first condition, then the answer is false. So in other words, you can abstract the Boolean away into a conditional based on where the alias lives, which I suspect actually gets back to the root of James' problem.
Yeah, and then by the way too, and that goes back to your earlier point too, where you can create additional, or the point we were talking about, create additional attributes. You could create a new attribute for that alias, have this alias work differently, which would then trigger the code. So that's absolutely a great way of doing it.
So using Art's approach, I could have, say, an attribute that had terms that said, I want an introduction, and I want, or for example, let's say a person, and I'm trying to generate the author string, and I need to include parts of the information from their person record. I could say I need, their name, I need their affiliation, and I need their email address.
Right.
And then have the action code go through and just pull that out for the particular article that I'm writing at the time.
That's exactly right. And I do that kind of stuff all the time. Okay. And let me give you this quick example. Now, Art's Boolean approach is great. The other approach that was coming to my mind was this kind of proxy approach. So if I link this note to this note, and I'll just, and I'll give it a name. I'll give the link, and we'll call it, I don't know, let's call it past stuff. We'll call it past for just lack of creativity. So I've got a note that says, the note name is passing data. And so then if I create in note 1, and then if I look at the, you can see my inbound notes is note 2. And if I look at note 2, my outbound note is note 1. So if I'm in note 1 and I have a rule running on note 1 that says my string equals links dot inbound pass my string, right? So essentially what this is saying is make my string equal to the values that are in any note linking to me with the name pass, and grab its information in my string and stick it into my note. So if I run that now, you'll see this is some info. This is some info. If I go down here and I change this, and then I go back up here and run it, you'll see it's already instantly changed. So that's another way to get information around. And then when I'm running this note, I can then create templates and trigger information off of this note. So I do that all of the time because again, the Boolean options that Art's referring to are really good for like certain types of display and templating controls. But if I want at the local note the ability to, transclude, transmute, transform information locally within that note, I really want that information in the note because because especially for me, because I make mistakes. If I make a mistake, I want it to screw up that note, not my original. Right. So that's kind of the way I manage that. And here's a great example of how I do that for like my speakers. When I manage and organize speakers, I have all, grab from the original people note, just like what you're doing, all of that information, and then I can use it locally to populate it.
Okay.
I put a link in the chat for the links operator if you haven't already found it.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like both approaches are going to be handy in different ways.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I've learned. If anything, if there's one way to do it in Tinderbox, there's probably 10. You know, it just depends on your, and 10 being like this, meaning a whole bunch. You know, and really where it gets down to is how much refinement do you need to do? Do you need to get it done like in the next 20 minutes, or do you have time to make it elegant, you know, and get it done later? So a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll take a solution that gets it done in the next 20 minutes because I have to get something out to a client or something like that. Then I'll circle back and make it more elegant. I'll do the incremental formalization. I'll find out different approaches on how to do it. And because a lot of my files will have 5,000-10,000 notes in them, then as my files get larger, then the whole issue of optimization and even on an M2, if you've got 4 Tinderbox files open, each with 10,000 notes, that's 40,000 edicts running, of which might have 20 different lines of code each. So you're now running millions of operations every second. Well, that slows an M2 down, surprisingly. So you then need to back off and think about alternative optimization strategies. But 99% of the people won't need that for a while. And by the time they do, then they'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I'd also add, one thing is I wouldn't worry about even trying out a method that you've sort of heard suggested, which you sort of already know isn't quite what you want, because often just the act of implementing it will help you see where it is you want to make changes. Now, that might be to use a completely different method. It might be just to tweak the method itself, but it's all too easy to look at something. And this, I've sort of seen this occasionally in the forums over the years. Someone said, yeah, but that's not what I want. But then they're often unable to explain exactly what it is that they do want. So sometimes doing almost something you know is not quite right will help you get to the point and say, right, I understand what it is. You know, what's the extra bit of information I need, or where is the context I need to ask a question that helps me get to the place I want to go.
Well, and again, and just like Bruce brought up earlier, well, I don't need to write a CV, or I don't need to write a resume. Well, yeah, but most people don't. Like, you know, or they only have to do it every once in a while. The point being here is everything we've taught here is imminently transferable to any project. You know, and it's sad, and sadly, people will have seen, well, this is a resume class. I don't need to write a resume. I'm going to ignore it. When in fact, what it really was is a Tinderbox fundamentals class.
Well, actually, I made a note at the end, Michael. You essentially what you've created is the sort of personal information manager. So in fact, the resume is almost, I know this is a classic thing. You started out to make a resume, and to be general, you overbuilt it, which is great for all the good reasons we've discussed. So in fact, one of the things this now does is make a resume. But it can do so much more because you have all this extra information. And indeed, one of the challenges you now have is making your resume is not a matter of exporting the whole document. It's actually a matter of saying, well, which bits do I want? And it's great. And as you've shown, you can actually fine tune it, because by and large, in today's world, everyone wants a slightly different version. When they say, I just want a resume, they actually, you know, there's some nuance. So I think it's really interesting, this. But what you've created is an information manager.
And more importantly, you're not deleting stuff, right? Because you invariably will forget it. You won't remember. You'll have it 10 different places, and you'll give yourself a freaking nightmare. Whereas this, all of that important information is one place. And oh, by the way, this is the other thing I love about Tinderbox, and that's what my whole doctorate was about, is personal information management systems at both an individual and commercial scalable way. And Tinderbox is it's an erector set for building personal information management systems. It's an ERP system. It's a CRM system. It's any whatever label you want to call metacognition attribute management system. I mean, it's incredible. And if you can learn this in Tinderbox, you can then take what you learn about Tinderbox and scale it to any commercial CRM, PIMS, ERP type system. It's fundamentally the same. Art.
Oh, yeah. So many actually little side thoughts coming out from that last bit of conversation, and yeah, completely spot on. I like the idea of personal information manager. Almost an addendum to your thesis. You've actually created a live example of your work in a Tinderbox format. Actually, I was going to ask about one thing is, because of the sheer vastness of the number of templates and rules and edicts that you typically tend to put into your project files, have you come up yet with a sort of universal library system, or have you dug into?
Yeah, honestly, I right now I typically only use about on average 5 functions for 2 templates, and yeah, that's it.
I
Yeah.
see. So for the vast majority of projects, no. But I mean, on something like this, you had something like 7 or 8 templates just for this file.
Well, yeah, because then I got really nuanced. I want to be able to render, and again, also too, I was trying to get this done in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Right.
I'm trying to render the education a little bit differently than the employment, a little bit differently than the volunteering. And then what I find is I don't want to break what I just got working for employment. So I'm going to copy the employment one, create a different one to see if that makes sense or if I get value from that. And if I do, then maybe I merge them together once I kind of got it.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Got it.
So,
okay.
Art, it might also help, and you can go and look at it because it's all in ATBRF if you download it. But it's something like this, about 95+% of the pages actually export through one template, and they use a bit of boilerplate sort of template pulled in. It was many before, and I'm still unsure which is best. So I have a thing but if you look at the main template, it's really big and it's got a lot of conditional stuff in it. And even when I look at it, I have to still take a moment to say, okay, what on earth was I doing here? Because it's all about putting the bits in. So there is no one right way, but I mean, I think it is probably the case that in many of the projects, there's a sort of, 90-10, 80-20, whatever rule that you'll probably end up, most of the heavy lift is being done by a small number of templates. The profusion of extra ones is normally all those little edge cases. And the joy is that you add them as you need them. And if you don't need them, and another thing is I don't normally rush to put away. So many of my long-lived files have somewhere in the templates folder a thing called something like old or something. And what I normally do is I set the title to strike through. So when I wander by accident into that container, I think, okay, right, this is the stuff I put away for later. And you could clean it up, but you might want to get back. But it's a sort of thing I sort of do. It's a lightweight way of disposing of stuff. So I think I'm done with that. Because getting to your point that when you go and look at your templates, it's a bit sort of overwhelming if you're suddenly looking at a list of sort of 20, 30 things and you're trying to remember, gosh, which one do I need? But again, that's where naming can help.
Well, my other observation, before I forget, my other observation there too is, for me, it's a lot like human evolution. I call them my appendices. I don't really need them, and I can remove them, and I'll probably live, but maybe not. And some of the edge cases too, because when you're starting to get 10,000 notes into a file, I may have forgotten where it is, and it's fine just to leave it because there might be some technical debt or some other side thing that's leveraging it that I totally forgot about.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. All right. The other question I had, Mark, you had referred to possibly us looking at that briefly. I don't want us to extend too far into extra time, but the new functionality of the arrow and the enter presses is not making sense to me, because I just had to go into a raft of note renaming, and it's incredibly frustrating because, really speaking, once you make an edit in the name of a note, what can you hit so that you escape out and you get it done?
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember. Mark did explain to me. Somebody really, really wanted the change that's been made, and in the way it was described to me, it makes sense. So I know what you mean. So I think the unintentional side effect is that when you select a note and you weren't actually meaning to edit it, it just so happened that because you held the key down a bit long or something, you've gone into edit mode. And then when you press return, the logic that's designed for a different purpose is getting in the way. I don't think, well, you can always press escape to get out.
that's not the point. Like, see, okay, supposing I have a note, okay, and
Yep.
this is a note. Okay, now I want to go and edit and change the name. So I hit Shift Command Enter, and then my cursor goes into the text, and then I can cursor my way to the place where I want to add. This is a fine note, and I type in the word fine and space, and then now what do I press in order to effect my name change?
I think as things what I know works and is not the answer you want is you probably press Command right arrow and then return. I'll ask. Mark's traveling at the moment. He's on holidays and literally is on a road trip. So poor chap is going from. So when he gets back or when I just see him in Poznan, I'm
I just
not
want
sure.
to raise the
I get the point.
conversation.
No, I get the point you're making. So there is. The new stuff is useful, except if that's not what you're trying to do. And so,
well, not only that, it doesn't fit in with. It's not how you do. Say you're in the Finder and you're renaming a file. What do you normally do? You hit Enter, and then that goes into the edit mode of the file name change. And then once you're done, you hit Enter again, and the name change is effected. And or
yes.
If you hit Enter and then you hit the up arrow, it goes to the head of the file name, or if you hit the down arrow, it goes to the tail of the file name. This is pretty much universal in Mac.
Yes, it is, and you're not wrong. But also the flip side is there are other people doing some subtly different things. So I think one of the things so for instance, I'm definitely the abstract end. I tend to make notes that have very short titles, and I might give them a color or something to remember really what they are. I'm very aware that some people, for instance, are doing close textual analysis or something, and in that context, they actually want quite long textual titles. So what they might do is they might type something in, and then they actually want to split that title, which to someone like me might look like the text of a note, but they've got these long titles and then they want to split them. And so there is a workflow there that does make sense in that context. What's happening is the collision of these two workflows. And it seems to me there may be something, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but there may be something essentially that just, it probably will be a modified return key that says, no, I'm done. I want out. Now, it means...
No, but I'm not even saying it from that point of view, right? I'm just asking from a very basic, supposing you were to rename a note right now.
Yeah.
How would you do it?
Why don't you share your screen, Mark? Show us.
Okay, so let me just share. Which one? Yep. So I think you're seeing, you're seeing this one. So,
yeah.
So I might make a note, but I might want to go back in, and I might want to. This is when you try and do it on demand. There we go. Okay.
Actually, maybe I should share my screen because then I can tell you.
No, absolutely. That's probably a much better idea.
Okay. So, but let me figure out because I don't know how to share screens. Obviously. Okay. Which one does this say?
It's green button on the toolbar.
So, but oh no, not that. But it's like I'm not sure which share. Oh, now I've got to allow privacy. Zoom. Okay, sorry.
And now, this is normally the point where it asks you to reboot Zoom.
It asked me to get out of Zoom and back in. That's BS. Okay, so I guess no. No, but it's like. Oh, one sec. Let me see if I can, because now everything is showing up, so I can actually see my screens. It was blank before, so I just want to find. I think this is the one. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I sharing? So which screen
can you see? For a moment. You were for a moment.
Okay. Awesome.
Got you.
Okay. Yeah, I found it. I found the actual screen. Okay. Now I have to go to that screen, right? I can't be in Tinderbox. I can't be in Zoom now, right? To make the changes.
No,
okay.
We're seeing you.
So,
now we're seeing.
Are you seeing? Okay.
Yep.
Are you seeing something saying a note that is awaiting renaming?
Yep.
Okay. So now I'm going to rename it as I used to in Tinderbox 9, right? So I'm going to hit Shift Command Enter. Now I'm in the note. Okay. Now I want to get to the head of the note. Okay, in the old time, I would just hit Command left arrow, I mean, I would just hit up arrow and I will go to the head of the note, which is exactly in line with what I would do if I were in the Mac OS Finder or any one of 1,000 applications, right? Now, if I hit the up arrow instead of going to the head of the note, it pops me to the prior note.
Yep.
Okay, which is it's really disorienting. And likewise, now I'm in edit mode in the prior note, so now that's completely messing my scene up. If I
So
have
just
14
press left arrow for a second. If you press left arrow
left arrow takes me to the head.
to the head. So that, I mean, so it's not what you expect to do, but there is an answer to that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So okay. So let's now I'll change my muscle memory. Okay. So that I've got the left arrow and right arrow to get to the head. But you see now, supposing I'm here, right? I'm in cursor mode at the tail end of the note name. Now how do I get to the head of it? I can't press the up arrow. I have to hit command left arrow to get to the head of it. And now I'm in basically like Microsoft Word, or using command and option to skip either from head to tail, or like option to go from word to word, right?
You're treating it.
So it's like a line in it. It's now Tinderbox is truly behaving like an outliner. So this, I'm assuming that all this was because of the outlining aspect, right? Even
I think it was. I mean, I wish I could remember the use case, but there was when explained to me a perfectly reasonable use case for somebody wanting.
Right.
So I think this.
I think it was Bernard.
Again, with when you've got longer, when you've got longer titles, so you're not. So it's not just a note, but it's like it maybe it's 2 sentences of a source text, and you now want it to be 1. It's that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so fine. So now that's covered by first aspect, right? Now I've renamed the note. Okay, this is the new. This is just before I finish renaming, I want to go has been well renamed, whatever, right? Okay, now I'm done. Now what do I press in order to affect my name change?
You don't press return because, as you will show us, it will split into 2 notes. I think at the moment, I think at the moment, the only safe thing is to do command right arrow and then hit return. I need to dig into my notes as to when I know. I suspect the answer is that if there isn't now, the answer will be to have probably some sort of a modified return key. Because
no, and my point is that if you are in the Mac paradigm, okay, and say if you're in a word processor paradigm now if you were here and you wanted the rest of the text to go on to the next line or the next note, you would actually press option enter, and that would split your note, which is the way it ought to be.
Well, I think that's the answer. Is the thing is, none of these things are set in concrete, and genuinely, I mean, I would make that because you'll make it more eloquently as the person in the sense who's butting up against it. And this isn't please do my homework, but I mean, I would make that point because this was the changes were implemented to suit a use case, and we can see, and you're not the first person who's asked about this. Some people were asking on the backstage about it. It strikes me it's getting the balance. This takes me back to when version 5 was out, which is a long time ago, when it became possible to edit notes like you're doing at the moment. And there was an endless debate on how long you had to hold a key down to trigger the edit mode, like in Finder. And it turned out that no one could agree. So we have it is as it is now, but it's a similar sort of thing, and there are all sorts of adjustments were made, and I think your point is well made. So the question is that it might be that rather than the return splitting, it might be that you want an optional return or some modified thing, and I don't think any of this is set in stone. Where it is as documented at the moment.
So also, and this is taking a page from your book, because you're a very keyboard-centric person. We'd have had a conversation about this, about user interface and having to lift your hands from the keyboard. So once I'm not.
I'm completely cat-handed. I mean, I'm a word destruction machine. I can spell, I just can't do it via a keyboard. So I'm very much chipping a hunt and peck. But you're absolutely right, and this is another thing that comes in, because there is a tension between the expectation of people who are very keyboard centric, and that's not as a judgment, but there is a spectrum between people who literally press one key at a time, and use a mouse or a trackpad for other things, and other people whose hands barely leave the keyboard. And it's not always possible to entertain both things at once. So that this is another thing. But I think your point's well made, and it's probably worth bringing up. And it may be, as I said, I've written down as accurately as I can based on Mark Bernstein's release notes and my testing of it. There are 2 links that I put up earlier, but otherwise you can go into, if you look for map view and outline view, there are slightly different things for those 2 views, and a number of other a number of other views will act as per the outline view. So probably not as a map view, it's quite singular, but
right,
so
it
you
would
may
be like
see
a
the similar
broad
behavior in 1 or 2 others. But I just don't know. If I haven't written it down, then it's an unknown. And even if it is written down, it's only the status quo at the moment. That doesn't mean someone can't come along with a better idea and we can't improve it.
Right. I mean, and also I just had one last thought on that, and one request. And the thought was that I think this probably a lot of this is originated from the fact that in Tinderbox, unlike almost any other program I know, you actually have to hit the return key in order to start a new note. There's no other environment that I can offhand think of where hitting an enter return is actually starting a new note, because that's you normally hit that when you're starting a new line. But if you're in the Finder, for example, or you hit Command N.
But if you're on a view,
no, I'm not saying I'm saying other than Tinderbox, any other app. If you're doing something new, you hit Command N.
Yes, but if you're sitting in a conference taking notes, which is probably Mark's normal starting, it's actually quicker.
I'm not debating it.
So
I'm very happy with the return. I love the return. Don't get me wrong. I just love it. Right. But I think that when you depart from the sort of the consensual user interface methodology, what ends up happening is we go into this new space, but now you're making your own rules as you go along. Because otherwise we would say, okay, stick to it just like Microsoft Word does, and everybody would be, eating off the same cafeteria menu.
But we had someone who turned up. We had someone turned up the other day who was most put out that they couldn't do an outline inside a note, which struck me as a bit odd. So they were sitting in an outline, but they wanted to write the outline inside the text of the note, and
actually I have a long thread on that, Mark. And remember we talked about it in fact with Eastgate as well. I said, okay, now I'm going to do this upward outlining process because I would love to have an outliner inside a note, and then decide whether it's going to become its own outline or not.
Funnily enough, one thing that actually gets towards that is also the recent support. So if you use the quick list notation, so if you put an asterisk at the beginning of a line, it will indent it.
Yeah.
And if you use 2, it'll indent it. So that also helps.
That brings up my other big question. I'm going to throw a big one at you. So now I have 14 Tinderbox files with 8,000 notes, and I've been doing indent, and showing the ruler and having multiple. Now, how do I go back and clean all that stuff to make it conform to the new outlining convention?
Right. If you have used so quick lists will, in a sense, work automatically off the occurrence of an asterisk or a hash mark if you're using a number list. What you can do is there are on the format menu, if you go to the bottom of the format menu, I haven't got it open in front of me at the moment, but if you go to the bottom, there's something. Yeah, and standard font and reset margins, and between you can't set them both at once. The standard font basically will reset everything. Standard the margins. Sorry,
it won't delete the multiple tabs I have at the beginning of my indented lines.
No. Right, but okay. If I have an answer for that, I suspect Michael's ahead of me.
Yeah, you run a regex and you just delete tabs.
Yeah, I was afraid of someone's going to tell me that. Okay,
just
fine.
do a snap. They delete multiple tabs.
But
it's scary when you have thousands of notes. It's damn scary. Like you just killing a double tab somewhere. It's somewhere in the middle of a line. You have a double tab. I mean, I guess I can do \n and then 2 tabs and replace with,
No,
you
no,
know.
you're all right. If you just want them off the beginning of the note, you basically will be able to. The beginning of a string is a caret symbol in the regex. So what you, for instance, if you're worried, you could, rather than doing a whole note, you could ask a note. You could iterate the sentences in it, the which
Mhm.
are the paragraphs, because
Mhm.
basically a line, a paragraph is just between
It's
two
the same.
lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could, as long as you basically, if you look for caret and one or more tabs
Mhm.
following that, and just say remove them, that's
Mhm.
job done. Or you might
No,
want
that's
to
what I'm saying.
replace them
Shouldn't
with
I
an
do like the command \n caret tab, because that, and then replace it with \n, because that way
you
I'm just
can
taking,
do. Yep.
because that way I'll only get the the double tabs that are at the beginning of each paragraph. I don't, supposing I put 2 tabs in the middle of a line.
That, well, if you, a caret symbol wouldn't catch that either, because a caret is saying from the beginning of the string that you have.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's a
So
huge
caret is
elementary block
beginning and $sign
of
is
every
the end.
paragraph. Okay.
So you know,
Okay.
if you were looking for sake of argument, if for some reason you developed a weird tick and you kept typing tabs at the end of your paragraphs, you look for tab followed by $sign, which is the end of the string.
Okay, so then it will
So
take
you
all
can,
the tabs until the end of string, until end
yeah,
of paragraph. Okay.
for the string you've been given. Now, if the
Yeah.
string is the whole text, then you might
Hmm.
want to use \n. The
Okay.
answer is because only you will know the peculiarities of your own text. Is I would just take a couple of notes and experiment, pick one that works, and then don't bother trying to refine it.
Yeah. Or as I comb through my documents in future point of time, whatever, I can, oh yeah, there's a bunch that I hadn't done. Boom, apply a stamp and
Yeah.
go ahead with it. Okay. Good. That is, there's 2 things that have been bothering me since the last.
But do raise the point about closing out the edit. There's probably some more useful reflection to have on that, in slower time.
And I mean, I'll anticipate the thing. Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, the other thing to remember that too is copying your friend. So before you start doing that, copy every called backup.
Yeah.
And then mess around with it, because invariably you will delete stuff and it will get scary. But if you've given yourself an archive, you're fine.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, on a nice happy parting note, I have a suggestion, an app suggestion. If you go over to the App Store on your iPhone, there is an app called Bebop, just like in the music.
Okay.
I highly recommend picking it up, especially if you're using mobile methods to enter data into Obsidian.
Really?
Because not only can, you just open up the thing, or just see how it works. It's so self-explanatory, but you just enter whatever text you want and you hit save it, and it will drop it into your vault, into a chosen subfolder in your Obsidian vault. And not only that, you can also customize headers and footers, and you can put in a timestamp, for example, if you want. So
Okay,
whatever you...
Sorry, how do I spell it?
Bebop. Yeah, that's but try an exclamation mark at the end of it. I can find his web page. Oh, I can find his site. Hold on a second. I'll just
We want to put this in the chat.
yeah, I shall. Just give me a sec to look for that email. Oh yeah, here we go.
No, I'm not finding it. Oh, here.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. Here you go.
iOS app for
That's the app. Yeah. It's very sweet. So basically my note, I enter whatever the heck I want, and I've customized it so that it'll put a header or a footer as I need, and it'll pop up in Obsidian, and those headers and footers become properties. And then you use your watch folder in Tinderbox so that note goes from your iOS directly to Tinderbox, essentially, using Obsidian simply as a way station.
Right. That's pretty cool. And by the way, you noticed how we talked about this the other week, where if you copy like Word file headings into Obsidian, it converts them to Markdown. You saw that,
It
right?
does, yeah. But there's multiple apps and environments that are doing that, right? Wasn't there someone just the other day on the forum who has his application, the one that allows PDF notation, and he does a bit of markup stuff there too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone, wow, there's a marathon session today.
Indeed, 11 to 17. Wow.
Super fun. Any other parting comments, remarks, thoughts?
No, thanks. This was a really great demo. I really appreciate it. And as you were saying, applying it to my kind of things. I wish I was a little more familiar with export, but I'm not there yet. I've got a whole bunch of content that I'm just massaging and renaming right now.
Yeah.
At some point,
the only thing I'd say about export is just start simple. Don't try and write a really complicated page from outside. And another way that if you're reasonably familiar with HTML is to mock up an HTML page as you want it, and then think and then say, okay, how do I get this bit into here? And you can, that's how I learned it. I mean, and then you just leverage your way up the tree, and then you will end up with something Byzantine and complex and some stuff that might do. But I think the easiest place to start is just a simple page. So, oh, right. So this thing here in the app goes to this place here on the page, and then it gently falls into place. And
all my CSS stuff will go inside that particular template, right? Can I call one template from another template or one CSS file from?
Okay.
If you look at the if you download the ATBref doc, see that the CSS is exported. And in fact, I even export some JavaScript. So the search page, the JavaScript for that is actually generated when I export the whole file. So you can, you can, for instance, have a site-wide CSS. You don't have to put all the CSS in. You may find it, again, for that reason, I wouldn't worry. If you're trying to get the right words in the right place, don't overload yourself by trying to do all the styling at the same time.
For sure, I understood your point.
I want to go back to that point I made earlier. This is the beautiful thing about Tinderbox. It separates structure from your content from its appearance. So if you think about it, content Tinderbox, structure is HTML, CSS is appearance.
Very nicely said. Yeah, I get it.
Right, and you just kind of break those elements up, and then you have the ultimate flexibility.
Right, and that's what I just wanted to get started from the ground up. I don't even care what my CSS looks like right now. Is my point, and then I would just deal with it.
Be okay with ugly, right? So just focus on content and structure, and then once you have content and structure right, you can layer in appearance by putting in the CSS.
Yeah, and
so in the text field of the template, that I would put some instruction saying refer this outside external CSS file.
Yes.
Where it would go.
Again, and let me show you real quick.
It would actually go in the head of the doc. It goes in the head of the HTML file. And
again, when you rewatch this, there's a couple of ways to do it, but if you look here, here, right? So right here, and you're saying go get the text from this.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I recall now that you've shown this before. Perfect.
And in this case, that file will put the CSS physically, as it were, into that one file. If you want to do a site-wide CSS, just look at the way it's done in ATBref, and because I know anyone watching this can go and get that file, and you'll see.
And I do it this way for a specific purpose.
No, absolutely, I'd agree, because what you can do is you can start with bare text. Then you can do a bit of styling and just put it in the document. Once you know you've got the bits, you think, oh right, so now I'll take this CSS, put it in a separate file because I'm going to use it in 1,000 other notes or something. But as Michael says, simple steps.
But then here's the key. The next step is to go in and say, all right, now what am I going to do with those? Then I'm going to start like class equals type, right? And so if I jump to the CSS, which is here.
Gotcha. So if you ever change the class, I mean, you change the details of each class. That's the next level of abstraction, the appearance one.
So then I can go ahead and just adjust the class. So that's how the one is getting the CSS into the file. The two is then mapping the CSS to its elements.
To its elements. Got it. Got it. Got it.
So
Perfect.
here are the elements. So like this is.
Thank you. This is very useful.
This is
Okay.
class title 2. This is class container. This is class subtitle. This is class right.
Right.
This is class
So
left.
sorry, can you go back 1 second? How are you calling the resume item, the T resume item note?
Okay, so go back here. I've got when I've selected a top level note, the note I have selected, I'm assigning
Oh,
a
yes.
template. And
Yeah,
then
And then you have the
say,
sub template page.
And I want all of its children to go to pages. So this is a lot like this is a lot like that abstraction. So then what happens when it goes to pages, it then says resume pages. When it goes to resume pages, it then says, well, if you're a blog post, do it this way. If you're a volunteering or employment, do it that way. So I'm paying, and then I type, apply this different template.
This is so great because you can just copy and paste this into a next file, and it's essentially it's got all your options. Perfect. Beautiful.
And the other thing is, don't worry. Another thing that might confuse you is that the templates, it doesn't, nesting the templates is useful for you to understand how you use them. So if a T resume page only gets called by T resume, it kind of makes sense to nest it. But it's Tinderbox doesn't care as long as basically it's a bit like it's the same as notes and note titles and paths. As long as the note title is unique, then you can just call the name. It doesn't matter where it is. You can call it via its path, in which case you need to know where it is, which is one of the reasons that sort of Michael and I tend to use this sort of, it's a rather explicit naming. And the whole part, the reason is twofold. One is it tells you what it is. If it begins with a T, it's not going to be a prototype sort of thing. And the second is, it's highly unlikely that you would type the word T resume in general text. So the likelihood of you basically inadvertently duplicating the name of the template becomes very low. And in simple things, it doesn't matter. But where you're using code and you're passing around template names and things, then there does arise the possibility that if you just called it resume page,
for sure,
you would have
duplicates all over the place.
That's really important. You see where it says path here, templates, resume, this.
Yeah.
And that are the same thing.
Right, of course, as Mark was saying, but and it will find it in the project. Perfect.
Right.
Wonderful. That's a big learning for me here.
Context, I just tend because if I did, oops, let me go back. If I went and did this. Right, and I did this. So if I'd set it up that way, this page could be there. Doesn't matter. It could be anywhere in the file. Right. I tend to put everything in templates because it's muscle memory. I know where they are. It's easier to edit. Right. And
I know it's a silly question, and I know you'll tell me the answers but why do we put it in quotes and if it's because abstract reference?
Because in this case, we're explicitly telling Tinderbox that this is a note name. No, Tinderbox.
Okay, and otherwise it wouldn't know.
Yeah,
children.
It will guess, but why does it guess? When you put it in quotes,
okay. But if you take out the quotes, it will still work, right?
Yeah.
In this particular situation,
it should do. It's the sort of right. So this is this whole thing about when do I need to quote? So it's actually the same rubric as you use with attributes when you're trying to refer to something. So the general convention is that the thing is, if you put it in quotes, you're not the expectation is you're putting it in quotes because you're giving it a name. So you're saying this is a unique name, go find it. If you put the whole path, and the whole path will start with a // then it's saying, look, this is a path, just go read down the path and you should find something at the end of it.
That's what I wanted to understand. Got it.
And the convention that I say it's no stronger than a convention is that we don't quote paths. If Tinderbox gets given a path, well, it'll go and it basically it should get to the same place. It's not a rule. I tend to follow the convention simply because it reminds me if I'm not using quotes, then I'm using a path, and if I am, then I'm using a name.
Got it. No, that makes so much sense. Okay. Well, I'll just respond to.
All right, got a lot of value today.
Yeah. Oh, as always.
Awesome. I like the dialogue. This is really good. All right. Well, this is a hell of a marathon today. It was what, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah. Now straight to lunch,
Great, everybody.
basically. I haven't
All right,
had my
everybody.
coffee yet. All right. Thanks so much again, and have a great week, you guys. Okay. See you next week.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.